The first time my own family tried to erase me, it happened in a hospital hallway with the smell of disinfectant in the air, and my mother's wedding ring still warm in my palm. She had been gone less than an hour. I was standing outside the room where they had covered her with a sheet, waiting for my older sister Dana to stop talking to the nurse and come over. My younger brother Kyle was leaning against the wall with his arms folded, staring at the floor like if he didn't look at what just happened, it would not be real. My father walked toward me with a tight smile that did not belong on a man whose wife had just died. "Give me the ring," he said. I looked down at the plain gold band. I had taken it off my mother's finger because her hands had started to swell, and I had not wanted it to cut into her skin. It felt like the last kind thing I could do. "I'm keeping it," I said. "I'll give it to Dana later, or we can—" He stepped close enough that I could see the red veins in his eyes. His voice stayed low. "Give it to me. It's mine." Dana turned her head at the sound of his tone. The nurse did too, then looked away quickly, pretending she was busy. "It was Mum's," I said. "She would have wanted it." My father's smile slipped, and for a moment there was nothing gentle left in his face. He reached out, not like someone asking, but like someone taking. I said, "Give it to me." It was not just the ring. It was the way he said it. Like my grief was in the way. Like my mother was already an object to divide. Like I was a child who needed to be managed. I curled my fingers around it. "No," I said. "Not right now." His hand closed around my wrist. Not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to remind me who had the power in our family. Kyle looked up, then looked away again. Dana walked over, her eyes wide, and for a second I thought she would tell him to stop. Instead, she said, "Just give it to him, Evan. Not here." I stared at her. My sister, who had once punched a boy in the nose for calling me weak, was telling me to surrender my mother's ring so we could keep the peace in a corridor. My father tightened his grip. "You hear her? Don't make a scene." A scene. That was what he called it. Not grief, not respect. A scene. I loosened my fingers and let the ring fall into his palm. He released my wrist immediately, like touching me had disgusted him, and he slid the ring into his pocket with a clean, practiced motion. Then he looked past me, at the doors, at the people moving in and out, and he said, calmly, "We need to talk about arrangements, and about what your mother left. What she left, not who she was, not what we lost, what she left." At the time, I told myself it was shock. People behaved badly when they were shattered. Family said the wrong things. Grief made you selfish. That is what I told myself because the alternative was too ugly to hold in my head on the day my mother died. But the truth was simple. That hallway moment was not grief. It was a preview. My mother had been the hinge in our family. She was the one who made my father's sharp edges softer, who translated his silence into something survivable. When she was alive, she could say, "Let Evan decide." And my father would back off. She could say, "That's enough." And Dana would stop playing second in command. She could put a hand on Kyle's shoulder and bring him into the room, into the conversation, into the family. With her gone, the hinge snapped. The door swung hard, and I was the one it hit first. 3 days after the funeral, my father called us to the dining table. The house looked the same, but it felt like someone had drained it of color. The chairs were in the same places, yet it felt like we were trespassing. Dana sat to my father's right, posture straight, hair pulled back, eyes dry. Kyle sat on the other side, shoulders rounded, fingers tapping in a nervous rhythm. I sat across from my father, hands flat on the table because I did not trust myself not to clench them. My father cleared his throat the way he did before making decisions for all of us. "I've spoken to someone," he said, "about sorting out your mother's affairs." I waited for him to say her name. He did not. Dana glanced at me and gave a small look that said, Behave. My father continued. We'll be selling the house. The words landed with a dull thud. I felt my mouth go dry. What? Kyle said. It was the first time he had spoken since the funeral. It's too big for one person, my father said. And I'm not going to live here alone with memories. I looked around the room. This was the house where we had grown up. The marks on the pantry door where my mother measured our height. The window seat where she read to us. The backyard where she planted a lemon tree and joked that it would outlive all of us. You can't just decide that, I said. My father looked at me like I had spoken in a foreign language. Of course I can. Dana leaned forward slightly. Dad's right, it's practical. What about Mum's wishes? I asked. Kyle's tapping stopped. He looked up, eyes flicking between us like he was watching a tennis match. My father's expression did not change. Your mother wanted what was best for me. I knew that line. I had heard him use it in smaller arguments for years. Your mother would agree with me. Your mother wouldn't like that. Your mother wanted peace. My mother had wanted fairness. She had wanted us to feel safe. She had wanted us to be a family even when my father made it hard. Did you read her will? I asked. Dana's eyes tightened. Evan, I'm asking, I said. My voice stayed controlled, but I felt heat rising under my skin. Did anyone read it? My father waved a hand. The details will be handled. The estate is straightforward. Straightforward. Another word he used when he wanted to avoid specifics. I looked at Dana. You saw it, didn't you? Dana's jaw moved like she was grinding her teeth. I saw parts. Dad's dealing with it. What parts? I asked. Kyle swallowed. Mum told me once she wanted the house to be for all of us. My father's eyes snapped to Kyle. Don't start. Kyle flinched like he had been slapped. That did something to me. It was small, but it mattered. Kyle was not argumentative. Kyle was not dramatic. If Kyle was brave enough to say that, it meant he was scared. I leaned back and forced myself to breathe. Show me the will, I said. My father stared at me for a long moment, then smiled again, that tight smile with nothing warm in it. I don't have to, he said, and you don't need to worry about it. You've got your own life. My life includes what Mum left, I said, and what she wanted. Dana spoke quickly, as if she could smooth this over like she used to when we were kids. Evan, you're upset. Let Dad handle the legal stuff. It's complicated. It's not complicated, I said. It's a document. People read documents. My father pushed his chair back slightly and clasped his hands. Here's what's going to happen, he said. We'll sell the house. I'll move into a smaller place. Dana will help me. Kyle will do what he always does and try not to make trouble. And you, Evan, will stop acting like you're entitled to tell me how to grieve. There it was. The pivot. The rewrite. My request was not about my mother's wishes. It was about controlling him. My concern was not about fairness. It was about entitlement. I looked at Dana again, waiting for her to correct him, waiting for her to say that was not what I meant. Dana didn't. She just said quietly, "Please don't make this harder." Harder. As if I was the problem. That night, I went home to my small apartment and sat on the floor with my back against the couch. I did not turn on any lights. I stared at my phone, at the last message my mother had sent me. It was a simple thing, a reminder to pick up milk, with a heart emoji at the end like she always did. It made my throat ache. I could not shake the feeling that something was being taken from us while we were still too stunned to fight. In the weeks that followed, my father moved fast. He met with someone about the house. He took down family photos. He packed my mother's clothes into boxes and stacked them in the garage without asking if any of us wanted something. Dana was always there when these decisions were made, standing beside him like a deputy. When I asked questions, they answered with soft voices and empty words. It's just easier this way. We're trying to keep things simple. You're reading too much into it. And when I asked again, the tone changed. Why are you making this about you? Do you want Dad to suffer more? Stop accusing people. Accusing. That word became a tool. If I asked for information, I was accusing them. If I wanted transparency, I was attacking them. If I said I felt excluded, I was being dramatic. Kyle withdrew further. He stopped answering calls. He started coming to family meetings late or not at all. My father called that disrespect. Dana called it immaturity. I called it survival. One afternoon, I went to the house unannounced. The front door was unlocked. I stepped inside and heard voices in the study. My father's voice and a man's voice I did not recognize, steady and professional. I paused in the hallway, my heart thumping. I want it done quickly, my father was saying. I don't want delays because of family disagreements. The other man said, we do need signatures, and the beneficiaries should be informed. My father laughed softly. They're informed enough. I felt a coldness spread through my chest. Beneficiaries. The word stuck. It meant there was a will, and it meant my father knew exactly what it said. I walked into the doorway. Both men looked up. My father's face changed in a fraction of a second, from charming to flat. Evan, he said, as if I was a telemarketer. The man stood up and offered his hand. I'm Martin. I did not shake it. Are you handling Mum's will? Martin glanced at my father, then back at me. I'm assisting with the estate, yes. Can I see it? I asked. My father's eyes hardened. Not now. Why not? I asked. If it's straightforward, show me. Dana appeared behind me, her hand lightly touching my arm like she was guiding a child away from danger. Evan, come outside. I shook her off. No, I'm done being told to wait. Martin looked uncomfortable. It's common for family to have a copy, he said carefully. We can arrange... My father cut in, voice sharp. We can arrange nothing until I say so. This is my house. It's Mum's estate, I said. My father leaned forward. Your mother left everything to me. The words hit like a slap. Kyle had been right. Mum had talked about the house being for all of us. She had talked about making sure we were secure. She had talked about how Dana could be controlling and how Kyle needed protection from being pushed around. She had said she wanted to be fair, to leave something for each of us. Everything? I repeated. Dana's voice went soft and urgent. Evan, please. This is not the time. This is exactly the time, I said, and my voice shook despite my effort to keep it calm. If that's true, then it's done. He can sell it, he can do whatever he wants, and we get nothing. And you're just letting that happen? Dana's eyes flashed. Don't talk to me like that. I looked at my father. Did she change it? Near the end? When she was medicated? My father's mouth tightened. How dare you? Martin held up a hand. Let's slow down. This is a difficult period. My father stood. We're finished here. He pointed toward the hallway. Get out. I did not move. My mind was racing, trying to fit pieces together. The speed, the secrecy, the way he took the ring, the way Dana stood at his side, the way Kyle was being shut down. Dana stepped between us. Evan, you need to go. You're upsetting Dad. Upsetting. Always that word. As if his discomfort mattered more than truth. I took a breath and forced my voice steady. I want a copy of the will, I said to Martin. I'm her son. I have the right to know. Martin looked at my father again, then down at his papers. We can discuss. My father moved around the desk and walked toward me until we were close enough that I could smell the coffee on his breath. You're not getting anything, he said quietly. And if you keep pushing, you'll get even less. Do you understand? even less, which meant there was something. Or he wanted me to believe there was something so I would back off. I looked past him at the study shelves, at the framed photo of my mother holding us when we were kids. It was still there, but the dust around it looked disturbed, like it had been moved and put back as a prop. I stepped back. "Fine," I said. "I'll go." Dana's shoulders dropped like she had been holding her breath. Kyle wasn't there. He never was for the fights. As I walked out, my father called after me, loud enough for Martin to hear. "This is why your mother worried about you," he said. "Always looking for problems." That was the first time he used my mother's voice against me so directly, so cruelly. I drove home with my hands tight on the wheel. By the time I reached my apartment, my grief had shifted into something else. Something colder. Not rage exactly. Something more focused. I kept thinking about what was at stake. It was not just money. It was not just a house. It was the feeling that my mother's life was being rewritten and packaged into a story where my father was the hero, Dana was the loyal helper, Kyle was the inconvenience, and I was the troublemaker. If they could make that story true, then everything my mother had been to me could be altered until even I doubted it. That is what gaslighting feels like when it is done slowly by people who know your weak spots. It is not one big lie. It is 1,000 small ones, repeated until the ground under your feet feels unstable. The next month, the house went on the market. My father did not tell me the listing date. I found out because a friend sent me a link with a short message. "Isn't this your place?" The photos made it look like a stranger's home. My mother's quilts were gone. Her books were gone. The kitchen counters were empty, scrubbed clean of her daily life. The lemon tree out back was cropped out of the frame like it did not exist. When I called Dana, she answered with a sigh. "Yes," she said. "It's happening. We didn't want to upset you." "You didn't want to upset me," I repeated, and my voice sounded strange, like someone else's. "So you hid it." "We didn't hide it," she said. "We just didn't make a big announcement." "I'm her son," I said. "It's my home, too." "It's not your home," she replied, sharper now. "You moved out years ago. Stop acting like you're entitled to everything." There it was again. Entitled. That word was their hammer. "I'm not asking for everything," I said. "I'm asking to be included. I'm asking for honesty." Dana paused, then softened her tone, the way she always did when she wanted to sound reasonable. "You're emotional. You're grieving. You're looking for something to hold on to, but Dad needs to move on." Move on. As if selling the house was therapy. As if clearing my mother out of her own home was healing. When I went to see Kyle, he met me at a cafe near his work. He looked tired, eyes dull, like he had not slept properly in weeks. "They're selling it," I said. He nodded without surprise. "I know." "Did you get a copy of the will?" I asked. Kyle's fingers tightened around his cup. "Dad said Mum left everything to him." "And you believed him?" I asked, then regretted how sharp it sounded. Kyle flinched. "What am I supposed to do?" He shuts down. "Dana tells me I'm being ungrateful. If I argue, they say I'm causing stress. I can't fight them, Evan." I looked at him. He was not weak. He was worn down. There's a difference, and my family had spent years pretending there was not. "What did Mum say to you?" I asked. Kyle's eyes flickered, then looked away. "She said she wanted us to be okay." "Did she say anything specific?" I pressed. Kyle swallowed. "She said she put something aside. For me. Not a lot, but enough. She said Dana would try to manage everything, and she didn't want me pushed out." That was exactly what I feared. My mother had anticipated this. She had tried to protect Kyle. "Then why is Dad saying—" Kyle shook his head. "I don't know. Maybe she changed it. Maybe I misunderstood." There it was. The doubt. the gaslighting doing its work. I leaned forward. Kyle, listen to me. Mom wouldn't leave everything to him after what he's like. She loved him, yes, but she loved us too. She promised fairness. Kyle's eyes filled, but he blinked it back quickly. He did not like to cry in public. I can't do this, he said. I can't fight them. I just want it to stop. I understood, and that understanding was another piece of leverage they had. They knew Kyle would fold for peace. They knew Dana would align with power, and they assumed I would get tired and give up. For a while, I almost did. The next few months were a cycle of small humiliations. I would ask for information. I would be told I was paranoid. I would push. I would be accused of being cruel to my father. When the house sold, my father did not tell me the final price. When he moved, he did not give me the new address. Dana said it was for privacy, that he needed space. My mother's belongings were sorted. Dana took most of the sentimental things, the family photo albums, the jewelry, the small paintings my mother had bought at local markets. When I asked for one thing, just one, Dana said she would see what she could do, and then never followed up. On my birthday, my father sent a message that said, "Hope you're well." No mention of the day. No call. Dana did not reach out at all. Kyle texted me late that night with a simple, "Happy birthday, sorry." The stakes stayed the same, but the shape of the loss changed. It was not a single event. It was a slow drain, a steady removal of my place in the family until there was nothing left but the role they assigned me, the difficult one. And once you are labeled that way, everything you do is filtered through it. If you speak calmly, you are manipulative. If you speak with emotion, you are unstable. If you withdraw, you are sulking. If you stay involved, you are controlling. It is not about your behavior. It is about maintaining the story. One evening, Dana called and asked if I could meet her. Her voice was careful, like she was walking across ice. We met in a quiet park. The light was fading. Dana sat on a bench with her hands in her lap. "Dad's been having a hard time," she began. I did not respond. I had learned that if I reacted, she would use it against me. She continued, "He says you've been distant, that you don't care about the family anymore." I almost laughed. Almost. "He told you that?" I asked. Dana sighed. "Evan, he's grieving." "So am I said. "Yes, but—" She looked at me like she was trying to find a gentle way to say something sharp. "He's alone. He needs support." "And what do you need?" I asked. Dana blinked. "What?" I leaned forward slightly. "You didn't call to check on me. You didn't include me in decisions. You didn't give me Mum's things. You stood next to him while he took her ring. You let him shut down Kyle. And now you're here telling me Dad feels unsupported." Dana's cheeks flushed. "That's not fair." "There's that word again," I said. "Fair. You and Dad don't like it." Dana's eyes hardened. "You always do this. You twist everything. You make yourself the victim." I held her gaze. "What did Mums will say, Dana?" Her jaw tightened. "What did it say?" I repeated, calm. Dana looked away. "It's done," she said. "The house is sold. Dad's moved. There's nothing to argue about." "There is," I said. "Because Kyle says Mum set something aside for him. And I know Mum wanted fairness. So either Dad is lying or something happened." Dana's voice dropped. "Stop. You're accusing Dad." "I'm asking a question," I said. Dana stood abruptly. "You can't let her rest. You can't let us rest. You keep dragging us back into it because you need drama." Drama. Another label. I stayed seated. If Mum left something for us and it was taken, that's not drama. That's theft. Dana froze. For a moment, I saw something flicker in her face. Fear. Not for me. For herself. She turned away, then said quietly, "You don't know what you're talking about." Then she walked off, leaving me alone on the bench with the cold air settling in. That conversation made one thing clear. Dana knew more than she admitted, and my questions were hitting a nerve. After that, the family pushback intensified in small, almost polite ways. My father began telling extended relatives that I was struggling, that grief had affected me. An aunt called and asked if I was okay, voice dripping with pity. A cousin stopped replying to my messages. Dana posted photos online of dinners with my father, captions about families sticking together, as if the absence of my face was proof that I'd chosen to leave. Kyle started avoiding me again, not because he didn't care, but because Dana was leaning on him. He told me in a brief call that she kept saying I was stirring things up and making it worse. It was a familiar pattern. Isolate the person asking questions. If everyone around them repeats the same narrative, eventually the person doubts themselves. For a while, late at night, I did doubt myself. I would lie in bed and replay conversations. I would wonder if I was being unfair, if grief was making me suspicious, if my mother really did change her will at the end and leave everything to my father because she felt sorry for him. Then I would remember the way my father's hand closed around my wrist in the hospital hallway. I would remember his voice saying, "You'll get even less." I would remember Dana's silence, and the doubt would shift back to clarity. I decided I would stop asking them for the truth. I would find it. I did not do it with drama. I did not storm into offices or make threats. I did it the way my mother would have done it, quietly, carefully, by gathering facts. The first step was simple. I requested a copy of my mother's death certificate. I was her son. It was not difficult. The second step was less simple. I needed to know who had handled the will and whether it had been filed properly. I called a general legal information line and asked basic questions. What rights did adult children have to view a will? How were estates handled? What records were public? I learned that in many cases, once probate is granted, certain documents become accessible. I learned that executors had duties. I learned that straightforward was often a word used by people who wanted to avoid accountability. I also learned that my father's speed could have been strategic. If he pushed everything through quickly, if he controlled access to information, he could shape the outcome before anyone had time to challenge it. But there was one problem. I did not know if probate had been granted. So I looked for traces, not in their words, but in the paper trail. I checked mail that still came to the old house, because I had set up a redirection years ago and had not canceled it properly. One day, a letter arrived addressed to my father with a plain return address. Inside was a notice about a bank account closure in my mother's name. My hands shook as I read it. Not with rage, but with the feeling of touching something real after months of fog. It listed the bank branch location. That was enough. I went to the branch. I did not demand details. I asked general questions about what documents were required to close an account after death. The teller explained the process politely, not knowing my personal stake. It involved proof of death, proof of authority, and identification. Authority. That meant someone had either been named executor or had been granted authority through probate. I left the bank and sat in my car, heart pounding. The stakes were still there, but now they had a shape. This was not just a family dispute. This was an estate being handled behind closed doors. Over the next weeks, I gathered more small pieces. A change of address confirmation, a utility cancellation notice, a junk mail offer addressed to estate of that suggested my mother's name was being used in a way I had not been told about. Each piece reinforced the same truth. My father had taken control of everything, and Dana had helped him do it. I considered confronting them again, demanding transparency. But I knew what would happen. They would deny. They would accuse. They would paint me as unstable. And if I did not have firm evidence, I would lose ground. So I kept calm and kept going. I hired a lawyer, not an aggressive one, not the kind who promised a war. I hired someone who was methodical patient, and looked at documents like they were puzzles. In our first meeting, she asked me to tell the story from the beginning. I did. I kept it factual. I described the hospital hallway, the secrecy, the house sale, the refusal to show the will, the way Dana spoke, the way my father used my mother's voice as a weapon. The lawyer listened without interruption, then asked, "Do you have any proof of what your mother intended?" I thought of Kyle's words, but that was not proof. I thought of the conversations my mother and I had, but those were private. Then I remembered something. My mother had kept a small folder in the kitchen drawer. Inside were copies of important documents. She had once shown me where it was, half joking that if anything happened, I would know where to find things. After the house sold, I assumed that folder was gone, but I had never actually checked. The next day, I drove to Dana's house. I did not announce myself. I knocked, politely, and when she opened the door, her face tightened. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I need something Mom kept," I said. "A folder, kitchen drawer." Dana's eyes narrowed. "Dad handled all that." "I'm asking you," I said. "Do you have it?" Dana hesitated, just a fraction. Then she said, "No." I nodded. "Okay." She looked suspicious, as if she expected a fight. When it did not come, she seemed unsettled. I walked back to my car, got in, and sat for a moment. Dana's hesitation told me something. So I did something that felt strange, almost embarrassing, but necessary. I called Kyle and asked him to meet me near my father's new place. Kyle sounded nervous. "I can't," he said. "Dana will—" "This is about Mom," I said, and kept my voice gentle. "I need your help." There was a long pause. Then Kyle said quietly, "Okay." We met on a street near my father's unit. My father's building was plain, modern, impersonal. It suited him. No history on the walls. Kyle's hands were shoved into his pockets. "What are we doing?" he asked. "I'm not going inside," I said. "I'm not confronting him. I just want to see if there's anything of Mom's left." Kyle looked at me like I was asking him to steal. "We're not stealing," I said, reading his face. "If there's a folder with Mom's documents, it belongs to the estate. It belongs to all of us." Kyle swallowed. "He'll go mad." "He's already mad," I said quietly. "He's just aiming it at whoever challenges him." Kyle's shoulders sagged. He nodded once. Kyle had a key. Of course he did. My father needed him available, controllable, useful. We waited until late afternoon when the building's parking lot was busy enough that we did not stand out. Kyle opened the door. The unit smelled like fresh paint and coffee. No trace of my mother. No scent of her lotion. No soft clutter of her life. My father was not there. Kyle moved like he was afraid of leaving fingerprints on the air. We searched calmly. Not tearing things apart, not ransacking, just looking. In a hallway closet behind a stack of old coats, Kyle found a cardboard box. It had my mother's handwriting on a label. House? My throat tightened. Kyle lifted the lid and pulled out papers. Utility bills, old insurance forms, a recipe card. Then, near the bottom, a slim folder with a tab. Kyle held it up, eyes wide. "Is this it?" I took it carefully, like it was fragile. Inside were copies of documents, a list of account numbers, handwritten, a note in my mother's neat script. "If anything happens, please be fair. Please take care of each other." My eyes blurred, but I blinked it away. Then I saw something that made my stomach drop. A copy of a will. Not the original, but a photocopy, with a date. It was dated 3 years before my mother died. And it did not leave everything to my father. It left the house to be sold, yes, but the proceeds were to be divided. A portion to my father, portions to each of us, with an additional small trust for Kyle because my mother worried about his tendency to be pressured. It also named Dana and me as co-executors. Co-executors. I felt my hands go cold. Kyle read over my shoulder and whispered, "She did it. She really did it." I flipped pages, heart pounding. There was another document behind it. A letter signed, dated closer to the end of her life. Not a new will, but a statement of intent, reaffirming her wishes, asking that no one be excluded, and specifically noting that she did not want my father to pressure anyone. My mother had seen it coming. I sat down on the floor of my father's unit with my back against the wall, the folder in my lap. Kyle sat beside me, breathing fast. "What does this mean?" he asked. "It means someone changed something," I said, and my voice stayed calm because if I let myself feel it fully, I would break. Or someone hid it, or someone used a later will we don't know about. Kyle's eyes darted toward the door. "We have to go." "We will," I said. "But first I need photos." I took my phone and photographed every page. I did not take the folder. That would have been too easy to attack. They could accuse me of theft. They could claim it was forged. But photos meant I had a record. We put everything back exactly as we found it. We left quietly. Kyle's hands shook as he locked the door. In the car, Kyle stared straight ahead. "They lied," he said, voice flat. "Yes," I said. Dana's role became clearer in my mind. She might not have written a new will, but she had been there. She had helped control information. She had benefited from access to my mother's things and my father's approval. And my father had done what he always did. He had taken control, then called it love. I brought the photos to my lawyer. She studied them carefully, then looked up at me. "This is significant," she said. "It does not prove what was ultimately filed, but it proves there was an earlier will with clear intentions. It raises questions." "Can we find out what was filed?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "We can request records. We can demand disclosure from the executor. If they refuse, we can apply to the court." Court. The word felt heavy. I did not want a legal war. I wanted fairness. I wanted my mother's voice to be respected. But I also knew something else now. If I stayed quiet, my father and Dana would continue rewriting reality until Kyle believed he had imagined everything. Until relatives accepted their story. Until my mother's careful planning disappeared into a locked drawer in a unit that smelled like paint. The lawyer began the process. Letters were sent, formal requests. Calm, professional, impossible to dismiss as drama. The response came quickly. Too quickly, like they had been waiting for a fight. My father's lawyer replied that my father was the sole executor and sole beneficiary under the final will, and that no further information would be provided. Final will. I read the phrase 3 times. So there was another will, a later one that erased us. My lawyer called me and said, "We need to see it." "Can they refuse?" I asked. "They can try," she said. "But if you challenge, the court can compel disclosure, especially if you can show suspicious circumstances." Suspicious circumstances. My mother's illness, medication, my father's control, Dana's involvement, Kyle being shut down, the speed of the sale. I thought of my father's hand on my wrist. "Yes," I said, "do it." What followed was not quick, and it was not dramatic in the way people imagine courtroom stories. It was slow. Paperwork, waiting, formalities, more waiting. During that time, my family tried to regain control of the narrative. Dana called me, voice trembling with anger. "How could you do this?" she demanded. "I'm following Mum's wishes," I said. "You're destroying Dad," she said. "He's been through enough." "He took everything," I replied. "That's not true," she said quickly. "You don't know." "I have a copy," I said. "I know what she wrote." Silence. Then Dana said quietly, "Where did you get that?" The question was not outrage, it was fear. "I'm not discussing that," I said. Dana's tone shifted into something colder. "If you go through with this, you're done," You'll lose the family. I almost laughed again, but this time there was no humor in it. You already decided I lost the family, I said. You just want me to accept it quietly. Dana hung up. My father left a voicemail. His voice sounded tired, wounded, almost convincing. Evan, he said, I don't know why you're doing this. Your mother would be ashamed. I loved her. I cared for her. And now you want to take what she left me because you're bitter. Stop this. Come talk to me like a son. Like a son. Not like a man. Not like an equal. Like a son, meaning subordinate. My lawyer advised me not to respond directly. Let the process work. Let facts speak. Do not feed the emotional chaos they wanted. So I stayed quiet publicly. I did not rant to relatives. I did not post online. I did not make accusations in family chats. I focused on what was at risk. If I did nothing, my mother's intentions would be erased. Kyle would be left with nothing, not even the small protection she had planned. My father would keep control. Dana would continue to be rewarded for loyalty to power, and she would learn that betrayal had no cost. And I would learn the same lesson in reverse, that being calm and fair only got you pushed aside. I did not want that lesson to be the ending. Months later, we finally obtained the final will. It arrived as a scanned document, attached to an email from my lawyer with a short message. We have it. I opened it with my heart pounding. The will was dated 6 weeks before my mother died. 6 weeks. She had been heavily medicated then. She had been weak. She had been frightened. She had been, at times, confused. The will named my father as sole executor and sole beneficiary. It left everything to him. Everything. It also included a clause stating that any child who challenged the will would receive nothing. I stared at that clause for a long time. It was the kind of clause my father would love. A threat disguised as legal language. My lawyer called me that afternoon. The question is capacity, she said, and undue influence. Undue influence, pressure, manipulation. A person making someone sign something they would not otherwise sign. My father had always been skilled at pressure. Not loud, not overt, but relentless, like water wearing down stone. My lawyer said, we need evidence, medical records, witness statements, anything that shows she was not fully capable or that she was pressured. I thought of the letter in the folder, the reaffirmation of intent. It was not legally binding, but it was a window into her mind. I also thought of something else. My mother had a nurse who visited at home near the end, a kind woman with steady hands and tired eyes. She had once pulled me aside and whispered, "Your father is difficult." At the time, I had nodded, embarrassed, not knowing what to say. Now I called that nurse. I did not accuse anyone. I asked if she would be willing to speak to my lawyer about my mother's condition in the last months. The nurse hesitated, then said, quietly, "I wondered when someone would ask." That sentence told me everything. She met with my lawyer and gave a statement. She described my mother's confusion on certain days, her fear of upsetting my father, the way my father insisted on being present during conversations, the way he corrected my mother when she tried to speak for herself. My mother's doctor provided records showing medication changes and periods of cognitive impairment. Kyle gave a statement too. He was terrified, but he did it. He described what my mother had told him, her intent to protect him, and the way my father shut him down. I provided the photos of the earlier will and the reaffirmation letter. The case began to take shape. And that is when the power shift started. Subtle at first, almost invisible. Because for the first time since my mother died, my father could not simply declare reality and have it accepted. He had to answer to paper, to process, to a system that did not care how wounded he sounded on a voicemail. Dana tried to regain control by shifting her approach. She stopped threatening and started pleading. She came to my apartment one evening, unannounced, eyes red, voice soft. "Evan," she said, "please, this is tearing Dad apart." I let her in. I offered her water. I sat across from her, calm. Dana looked around my place like she was trying to find proof that I was still family. "He's getting older," she said. "He can't handle this stress." "Then he should have handled Mum's estate fairly," I replied. Dana flinched. "You don't understand what it was like. I was there every day. You were gone." "I visited," I said. "I helped when I could. But yes, you were there more, and you used that." Dana's face twisted. "That's not—" "It is," I said, still calm. "You had access. You were his ally. You made decisions without us. Now you want me to stop because Dad feels pressure. The pressure Mum felt mattered too." Dana's mouth opened, then closed. Tears slid down her cheeks. "I didn't want this," she whispered. I watched her. For a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy, not for what she had done, but for what she was. Dana had built her identity around being needed by our father. She had learned that loyalty was rewarded. She had never learned that fairness mattered more than approval. "You didn't want it," I said, "but you did it anyway." Dana wiped her face. "What do you want?" That question was the turning point, the moment where she stopped pretending this was about grief and admitted it was about outcomes. "I want Mum's wishes respected," I said. "I want transparency. I want Kyle protected. And I want you to stop lying." Dana swallowed hard. "If Dad loses, he'll have nothing." "He'll have plenty," I said. "He has his share. He has what Mum wanted him to have. He just doesn't get everything." Dana stared at me, and I could see her recalculating, like a person realizing the world had rules she could not bend. Then she said, "He'll never forgive you." I nodded. "He never forgave Mum for having needs either. That didn't stop her from loving us." Dinah left soon after. She did not hug me. She did not apologize. But she also did not threaten again. Something in her had shifted. She knew I was not going to fold. My father responded differently. He moved from emotional manipulation to legal intimidation. His lawyer sent a letter warning of costs, of consequences, of how challenging a will could harm family relationships. I read it, then handed it to my lawyer and said, "We continue." I kept working my own life, too. I had a job that I had treated like a steady thing, nothing more. During the months of legal proceedings, I threw myself into it, partly for distraction, partly because I needed to feel capable somewhere. I took on extra responsibility. I learned new systems. I kept calm under pressure. My manager noticed. Within a year, I was promoted into a role that paid more and gave me stability I had never had before. That mattered, not because it made me rich, but because it removed one of my father's imagined weapons. He had always treated money like control. He had always believed that if he held resources, everyone would orbit him. The more stable I became, the less he could threaten me with exclusion. Kyle benefited too. Seeing me stand firm gave him a strange kind of courage. He started answering my calls again. He started meeting me for coffee. He started telling me when Dana was pressuring him. One day, he said, "I used to think you were the problem." I looked at him. "Because they told you that." Kyle nodded, shame in his eyes. "They made it sound like you wanted to take from Dad, like you were greedy." "And now?" I asked. Kyle's voice was quiet. "Now, I think you're the only one trying to do what Mum wanted." That was not praise. It was grief, reshaped into truth. The hearing date arrived almost 2 years after my mother died. 2 years of slow erosion, of accusations, of relatives drifting away because they believed the story my father and Dana told. 2 years where the stakes stayed constant. My mother's wishes, Kyle's security, the integrity of our family's history. In the weeks leading up to it, my father's mask cracked in small public ways. He began telling people that I was attacking him. Dana told relatives that I was obsessed. An uncle sent me a long message about forgiveness and letting go. I did not reply. I had learned that when people are invested in a narrative, they do not want facts. They want peace. And peace often means siding with the person who sounds most confident. The courtroom was quiet, formal, almost boring in its structure. That boredom was comforting. It meant feelings did not run the show. My father sat at a table with his lawyer. He looked older. His hair had gone more gray. His posture was stiff. Dana sat behind him, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the floor. Kyle sat beside me, pale but present. When the earlier will and the letter were presented, I saw my father's jaw tighten. When the nurse's statement was read, I saw Dana's face go blank, like she could not process it. The doctor's notes were clinical, unemotional, devastating in their simplicity. The question was not whether my father loved my mother. The question was whether my mother, 6 weeks before her death, had been in a position to resist the pressure of a man who had controlled narratives in our family for decades. My father's lawyer tried to paint me as resentful, as greedy, as someone who had always disliked my father and was using grief as an excuse. I listened, calm, because in a way, it was familiar. They were trying to assign me a role again, but the judge did not ask about my tone. The judge asked about documents, about timelines, about capacity. When my father took the stand, he spoke softly about love, about devotion, about how my mother trusted him. He said she changed the will because she wanted him protected. Then the nurse's observations were brought up. The moments my father insisted on being present. The times he corrected my mother. The fear in her voice. My father's tone sharpened. "That's nonsense," he snapped, then caught himself and forced a calmness that did not fit. The judge watched him closely. At one point, my father said, "My son is unstable. He always has been." I felt Kyle tense beside me. The judge raised a hand slightly. "We will stick to facts," she said. Facts. The word felt like sunlight. The decision was not immediate. The court process took more time. But in the end, the final will was set aside due to concerns about undue influence and capacity, and the earlier will was recognized as the valid expression of my mother's intentions. It did not make me happy. It made me tired. Because winning something like that is not triumphant. It is just the quiet confirmation that you were not crazy, that your mother's voice had not been completely silenced, that fairness still existed somewhere beyond family politics. The consequences unfolded slowly, the way real consequences do. My father did not go to jail. There was no dramatic collapse. There was just the steady removal of his control. He had to account for the estate. He had to disclose what he had done with funds. He had to adjust, financially, to the reality that the house proceeds were not solely his. Dana faced her own consequences. Not legal ones, mostly. Social ones, relational ones. Relatives who had believed the story began asking quiet questions. Not all of them apologized, but the tone shifted. The pity in their voices disappeared. Some of them looked at me differently, like they were seeing the family dynamic more clearly for the first time. Dana tried to repair things with me in small ways, but it was awkward, like she didn't know how to speak without control. One afternoon, she called and said, "I didn't think it would go this far." I held the phone and stared at the wall. "It went this far the moment you let him take Mum's ring," I said. Dana went quiet. "I'm sorry," she whispered, and I believed she meant it in the limited way she could mean it. Sorry it had consequences. Sorry she could not keep the story intact. Sorry that being loyal had finally cost her something. Kyle received his portion, including the protection my mother had intended. It was not life-changing money, but it was enough to give him breathing room, enough to make him less dependent on my father and Dana, enough to help him start therapy, which he had avoided for years because our family treated vulnerability like weakness. My portion allowed me to pay down debt and put a small deposit on a place of my own. Not a grand house, Just a modest home where I could build life without feeling like everything was temporary. My father's portion was still significant. He still had comfort. But he no longer had the ability to hold resources over us. That was the true shift, because money in families like mine is not just money. It is permission. It is access. It is who gets to speak without being punished. As the dust settled, my father tried one last narrative rewrite. He told people he had given in to keep peace. He told Dana he had been generous. He told Kyle that this was all my fault, that I had forced him into a corner. Kyle surprised me by not absorbing it. He told my father quietly, "Mom wanted this. You didn't." My father stared at him as if he didn't recognize his own son. Kyle said, "You can be angry at Evan, but you should really be angry at yourself." Kyle told me about that conversation later, voice shaking, but with a small pride behind it. "That's the bravest thing you've ever done," I said. Kyle nodded, then said, "I couldn't have done it if you didn't keep going. That was the part that mattered most to me. Not revenge, not money, not victory. The restoration of Kyle's spine. The return of his sense that truth could survive pressure. My relationship with my father did not recover. He never apologized. He never admitted wrongdoing. He carried his bitterness like a badge, as if his anger proved his innocence. For a while, that hurt more than I expected. Even after everything, part of me wanted him to say, "I was wrong." Part of me wanted him to acknowledge my mother as more than a resource, more than a legacy to claim. But he could not. Because if he admitted he had taken too much, he would have to see himself clearly, and my father had built his whole life around avoiding that. Dana and I exist in a cautious peace now. We speak occasionally, politely, about practical things. Sometimes she tries to reminisce about Mum like nothing happened, and I can feel the old urge to correct her, to press, to force the truth into the open. But I have learned that you cannot force someone to grow. You can only refuse to shrink. The quiet satisfaction came later, in moments that were not dramatic at all. It came when Kyle invited me over to his new place, small but neat, and showed me a framed photo of Mum on his shelf. Not hidden, not controlled by Dana, not turned into a prop for my father's story. Just present, like she deserved. It came when I planted a lemon tree in my own yard and realized my hands were steady. It came when a relative who had avoided me for years said awkwardly, "I guess we didn't see what was happening." And I simply nodded, not needing them to grovel. It came when Dana, in one rare, honest moment, said quietly, "I didn't realize how much I was protecting him at everyone else's expense." I did not comfort her. I did not punish her. I just said, "Now you know." Because that was the entire story in one sentence. Now you know. People talk about revenge like it is fireworks, like it is a big moment where you watch someone collapse and you feel satisfied. But the kind of revenge that actually holds up in real life is usually quieter. It is not about destroying someone. It is about making sure they cannot keep destroying you. I did not hurt my father with violence. I did not ruin him with lies. I did not break laws or ruin innocent people. I simply refused to accept the story he wrote for me. I gathered facts. I used the systems that exist for fairness. I stayed calm when they tried to bait me into chaos. I kept the stakes in front of me every time I felt tired. My mother's wishes, Kyle's security, the truth. And in the end, my father lost the one thing he valued most: control over reality. That was his consequence. Mine was something else. I learned that family is not just blood. It is behavior. It is what people do when you are vulnerable. My mother's love was real. It was steady. It was the kind that planned ahead for unfairness because she knew exactly what her husband could become without her. And even though I could not keep her alive, I could do what she asked in that small handwritten note. Be fair. Take care of each other. Kyle and I are not perfect, but we are honest with each other now. We speak plainly. We check on each other. We do not let silence become a weapon. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about that hospital hallway. I still feel the warmth of the ring in my palm, the coldness of my father's grip. If I could go back, would I fight harder in that moment? Would I refuse? Maybe. But I also know something now that I didn't then. That hallway was not the place to win. The place to win was later, in quiet persistence, in paperwork and patience, in refusing to be gaslit into surrender. My father wanted a quick victory while we were raw. I gave him time instead. Time for truth to gather weight. Time for his story to crack under its own contradictions. That is why, when everything was finally settled, when the accounts were adjusted and the estate was closed properly, I did not feel the urge to celebrate. I drove to a small lookout near where Mum used to take us as kids. I sat in my car and watched the light fade over the trees. I took the copy of her note from the folder, the one I had printed and kept, and I read it again. Please be fair. Please take care of each other. I folded it and put it back in my wallet. Then I sat there, breathing steadily, feeling grief and relief living side by side. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace. Not because my family became what it should have been, but because I stopped letting them decide who I was.